Interview of Mr. Bennet J. Palmer at the Connecticut Street Armory, Buffalo, 21 February 2001. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert von Hassel. Videographer is Mr. Michael Akey. Mr. Palmer, tell me where you were born and raised.
I was born in Buffalo, raised in Holland, New York. And grew up in Holland I went to school. Well, first 2 years we went in a little school outside of the end of the road, one-room schoolhouse. We walked back and forth a mile. And then, of course, in 1932, we went to the Central School in Holland. And from there, I would proceed to go through till third year of high school. And, of course, at that time, there was Pearl Harbor days, and things were changing in our lives as well as, and I had a job. I got a job in Curtiss-Wright working on a C-46 on Genesee Street in Buffalo during the summer. Well, fall came, and my English teacher said, Ben, she says, you better quit that job and stay in school. Well, Ben was pretty smart, I guess, along with a lot of us other kids were awful smart in them days, and of course, I didn't go back to school. I stayed to the job. Well, then the selective service, I had it already registered because I had turned 18 that 1st of July that year of 42. So at that point, I decided that I would leave the school. Well, 2 months later, after I'd already registered, but 2 months later, I have noticed that I am all set to go in the service. We go from North Collins. There were several of my friends or school chums from Holland that would be at the same time in North Collins, where we would load on a railroad, sharing cars, and go to Fort Niagara. At Fort Niagara, of course, this was in the middle of February, colder than a son of a gun, and they had these big long barracks, probably 50 per barrack, men per barrack, a big old soft coal stove on each end, big old round one, and of course we had to keep that so it wouldn't, and guard that so it wouldn't burn us up. And from there, we would load them through several days after we got our wool ODs. Of course, we needed them in them days, and we loaded on some more railroad cars. They were personnel cars, but old wood slat seats, no heat, and not very comfortable. So we would head south and end up in McAllen, Alabama. Here, as an infantry training school, we would have 13 weeks basic training. After the 13 weeks, of course, we were all, trained on rifle, mainly. M1 rifle, and of course I got to be a sharpshooter, and of course I was able to write home and tell my mother that I was fully trained, and folks, and that we were all fully trained and able to go and fight the enemy. So therefore, they load us all up, they split us up again. Of course, I don't know whether it was because of the alphabetical Palmer or P or S or J or whatever, how they broke us up, but we already missed the friends that we'd been with, or already broke up again. We go to Chenango PA, in a camp at Chenango. Myself and another fellow from Holland, Charlie Stock, we had a 12-hour pass, so we hitchhiked home from Chenango PA. As we got home, of course, this is the first time I'd been home in the 13 weeks. Anyway, I called Charlie up and I said, Charlie, let's make this another 12 hours, and then we'll go back. My dad and brother will take us back in the morning. So we did. Well, we trucked back to load back in the little old pickup, and we go back to Chenango, PA. So within 10 days after we get back to PA, we were on a railroad again. I was going to Newport, Virginia. Here, I think it was by the end of July of 43, we would get on the boat, and we find out that this boat was called the Empress of Scotland, formerly the Empress of Japan. This boat had been taken over in Nova Scotia at Pearl Harbor or whenever the war broke out, that the British took it over. So from there, we land in North Africa, Casablanca, August 6th of 43. They give us 2 barracks bags, which when we got on, we only had 1. Everybody's trying to figure out why we got 2 barracks bags. And of course, someone said, well, them are body bags. Well, of course, that didn't make us guys very happy, dragging them. So we drag them down the street, and of course, we're looking at these kids, they're all naked, looking for chocolate or whatever they could bum. And we get into a Dust Bowl camp, or tent city type, and we stay there and get cleaned up for a couple days, and then they load us on 40-8s. Well, the 40-8 ride we figured wasn't going to be only a few days. Well, it turned out to be 10 days from Casablanca to Bizerti, through the tunnels, and we came out of there looking like the soft coal that these steam engines was burning, very black. We get cleaned up a couple days, and of course they feed us and that, and then they turn around and they tell us, oh, we all got to go back on the train. We're supposed to have been in Oran. Well, 7 days further back in Oran. And of course, when you put 40 men in a 40-8 boxcar, they're not very comfortable. Nobody can sleep all at once. They have to tie their back blankets across the car, and your butts are hanging on the next guy below you. So we got through that. We get to Oran. We do a little training, which we're all pretty soft. We haven't had any unit calisthenics or exercises or marches or anything. We don't even have rifles. We're just chasing. What we do get is a 36 APO. It doesn't say division. It says 36 replacement or battalion or something as such. It didn't tip us because we were all replacements. We had no idea what the 36 was until we find out. We load on a boat about, let's see, September 9th of 43 was when it's about 10 days before that, so that'd be about the end of August. We load on a boat from Oran, and we go to Naples Harbor. In the harbor laid a very, very large boat on its side, and they unload us right across this boat. In other words, we walk to get to shore. And at this point, everyone seemed to be, well, we trucked out of Naples Harbor, and of course we're dumbfounded because of the damage in the city that's just unbelievable for us guys, because we hadn't seen war. So, and of course the kids, the same old thing again, the young people and the kids and the desolate, and just terrible. But at that point, we go to a large warehouse, and here's where I will be put into the 143rd Regiment, Company B, 1st Platoon. And this will, as this whole story ends in the war, not knowing at that point, would be my home for the next 2 years. But anyway, we are put in, like I say, from whether it's because of the alphabetical order or what, we have no idea how they sort us out to go to where we did. But I will fight in the rifle company and platoon for the whole war. But to get back, now the story, you'd have to, our captain, of course, at that was Captain Waskow. Now this is the captain that Ernie Pyle wrote the story of bringing him off the mountain. I don't know if any folks have heard about it. He was my captain. So, later Ernie Pyle writes the story. Of course, this all came about, for me, late years, you know. But when they talk about it, they've had it on TV and that, of the story of Ernie Pyle, and the story that Ernie Pyle wrote, Captain Waskow was killed.
Yeah.
So, the war goes on. We go back after 40 days after joining the Company B 143, 1st Platoon. We will go online about 20 days after that. So I'll have 40 days of combat in San Pietro. I will get hit. That's the 12th month, the 10th day of 43. I get a wound. A walking wound, and back to this hospital and meeting the family. I think I'll skip that as far as, otherwise we're going to be here all night. Can you deduct? So I go back for 30 days back. First I go back to the hospital, and it's Eleanor Frew, a nurse from Holland, comes in. The doctor says, first she says, I think I know someone here that you should know. And this was Lieutenant Eleanor Frew. She was a nurse that helped patch me up, and of course I was walking wounded. And she says, before I left, she says, Ben Palmer, she gave me a peck on the cheek, and she says, Ben Palmer, may we meet again. And then of course I left. And then the next day, they loaded us on a DC-3, the walking wounded again. And there was about 25 of us, get us on the DC-3 from Naples for Foggia Airport. And we go to Sicily, Palermo. Why we didn't, but I asked the guys, and they say, well, the weather was so bad they wouldn't take us overnight. In other words, on to Bizerti. So the next morning we get back on the same plane and go to Bizerti, where there was a hospital where there's both walking wounded and severely wounded, because they was both there. Because we could take care of whether the problem was whether there was too full of wounded guys in Naples around there, I don't know. But the group of this hospital was out of Buffalo, the 23rd General, this nurse, and she, in other words, we knew her family. They only lived 5 miles from us at Holland, New York. So from there, on about I'll jump from about the 18th of, it would have been about 12th or 15th of January, 44, I would get on a boat again from Bizerti, go back to Naples, rejoin my outfit. And now this, when I do get back, after quite a long story, there's Captain Wasco. This is the first that I knew my Captain Wasco had been KIA. And so of course, as everything goes, life has to go on. In other words, so at that point, it was just 2 days. I got there the day after Rapido River. They canceled the third tryout for the Rapido River. I got back there on the 21st of January of 44, after Rapido River fiasco. So from there, we would go back up in the mountains and hold the mountains, and of course, and then after that it was Casino. It was when they bombed the Abbey. We were from here, well, on another mountain opposite of the Abbey. Actual bombing, we were in there on the mountain watching our 250 planes or whatever it was that come over and bombed that. Then the next day, they come back in and with about 125 or whatever planes and wipe out Casino, the village of Casino. And at that point, we'd been on the line by 40 days, so we pulled back. And this would have brought us into end of April. We will get refitted with troops, refit. Every time we come back, we always get new people. And then we were loaded on the boats. At the end of May, we go to Anzio. Now the 3rd, the 45th, the 34th had been fighting in Anzio since February. And if the Anzio story is relevant or in knowledge in anybody's heads, you know what happened to them poor divisions in Anzio. They got the crap beat right out of them. Terrible. We come in and relieved quite a lot of the 3rd Division's positions. But the general of our division, Walker, had been in a small plane, and he spotted a place that he kept telling Patton and Clark, that he could pull off 2 regiments behind Velletri and go around Mount Artissimo and go behind the German lines. I was in with the 143 and the 142, done that, pulled that deal. 141 was fighting in Velletri. All that night we walked behind the German lines with no shells in the rifles. Of course, we carried everything we could carry, but pretty eerie and scary. Well, that morning we broke out, and we got the Germans was shaving, there was eating. And in one foxhole, they had a guy there that was I suppose outpost, and he took a shot at me with a rifle and missed. Well, he wasn't so lucky the next time. But you know, it's just one of those that, you know, that happened that way, and that's the way this was. But it's so hard to, you know, I don't care if you're enemy or your own. It isn't fun, and to even talk about it, it's just. So, but therefore, as we break out into this flat, it was 5-6 miles from Rome at that point. Of course, everything is heading north. you can, if it could move, it was moving. I'll tell you, this was some history. And on the 4th of June, we were walking by my units was walking by the Coliseum. We loaded on everything. In other words, this is the great history that many of my friends didn't get to see, which I did see. We would, and if you think about this, as I was talking before, that June 6th, 44 was the invasion from into Normandy, France. And I feel bad a lot of times that, you know, Normandy gets a lot of publicity, and not that, man, they deserve every ounce of stuff that they got as far as, but nobody talks about the finish up in Africa, and the invasion of Sicily was no piece cakewalk. They lost a lot of guys. They dumped them in the ocean. Not that it was anybody's individual fault, but the weather come bad, and these poor suckers are airborne. I don't know. You don't hear about that. And of course, then the invasion of Italy, where I started. That 30 days after Italy, I was there, and from there on, I was there to the rest of the war. I mean, my wife said, "Well, Ben," she said, "we shouldn't." But Pyle, I was there. You know what I mean? It's a different. And so anyway, to carry it on, June, like I said, June 4th, we were walking by the Coliseum. Now, we'd been running, I think at that point, we'd already run 100 miles since Velletri. And we pushed another 125 miles north of Rome. And of course, at about that time, we were running out of everything. No supplies, no water. We looked like a bunch of rag bags, I'm telling you. And of course, I always say, well, and of course in my story, I write the fact that, well, all the rear echelon get to stay in Rome and all the great places, you know. And well, on the way back through, I did get a chance one day to go into Rome. And of course, I bought some cameos for my mother and this and that, you know, just a kind of a, but you know, you think about, and of course, I impress in my story of the 18 to 20-year-old kids that led the war. After 6 months, we were leading the dumb war. I was a sergeant in 6 months, leading a squad. 6 months later, I'm a platoon sergeant. Why? I wasn't any better or smarter than anybody else. I didn't know how to get away from an artillery shell. Nobody gets your pass. I was a survivor. You tell me why. I don't know why to this day. And even in my book, I won't tell you why, because I don't know why I survived. I mean, it just touches me that bad. In this book, my wife says I'm addicted, but after having all the information I got a 380 page of after-action reports for the 143rd Regiment only. This shows me every place that we fought. It tells the regiment or the battalion at any given place. I can follow the whole dumb war because I was there. If I wasn't there, I was only 2 times in the hospital. That was 60 days for the 2 places. So where else could you go? I had a 5-day pass to Paris. I had a 5-day pass in Caserta in Italy. And after the war, I got a 5-day one in Nice. But that was after the war. But to get back to the story of going north of Italy, we pulled back Salerno, Paestum area, south of Naples. We retrained. We're 7th Army now. On the way back, they're already telling us we're 7th Army. We got rid of Mark Clark. Maybe that's not a very nice way, but our division was not too happy with Mark Clark. I can tell you that in all truthfulness. We trained amphibious, and of course everybody says, well, it's an invasion, and it was southern France invasion. They give me a flamethrower. Of course, they only weigh about 78 pounds in them those days. So they trained me on a flamethrower, and like, as we get up, we pull out of port probably about that would have been August 15th was the invasion, so about 5 days earlier. So about the August 10th, we're out of anyway, Italy, southern, Salerno Bay. And we load on the boats. We get alongside Corsica, and we of course, we're all swimming, jumping over the board of the damn boat. We're all taking, you know how high those LST boats are, pretty high. And of course, you got the rope ladders to crawl back up on. So, of course, we're buck naked, but we don't give it. And the officers, they weren't really pushing us bad because, you know, hey, what the hell, we're having an invasion next morning. And they left us alone. So next morning, because I still got the flamethrower, the Navy says, Buster, you keep track of that thing, and you stay atop. You're going to stay by the thing. And I says, if things gets rough, you dump that thing right over the overboard. We don't want you down the hole. But it gave me a break because I had the first grandstand seat of the invasion. Everybody else was down in their holes, and of course, you couldn't let them out because you can't do that on a boat. You know how that goes. You can't put 6,000 people or 8,000 people on one side of a boat. So anyway, I see the whole thing. The sky was full of planes. They were pulling the gliders, the old DC-3s and Douglas or whichever planes they was using at them days. And of course, we hit Green Beach. As if you read the history, there's 3 beaches they run in on. Green Beach was very successful. In fact, the 142 that was supposed to went in on the Red Beach had to pull back and go in on Green Beach. And the poor Navy guy got his ass chewed simply because he changed orders from the Army orders. But we go in about 10 miles, 8 miles to 10 miles the first day. It was a necessity. We was to meet up with the airborne and the glider troops. And poor glider guys, I'll tell you, they got whacked bad. But this is what the story was, and this is the plan. And so therefore, in 8 days, I think we were Dijon, not quite to Lyon. Anyway, we would get on the. But first, as we got up pretty near about 150 miles up in France, we were running 80 to 100 miles a day. But we load on everything. In our historical book, it shows you the route Napoleon, or whatever it was, and it shows the guys riding on the tanks, or pulled behind artillery pieces, and everything else. And that one guy, that little guy that's on the back in that photo, I'm sure it's our platoon. Now, we're in France now, remember. And of course, this went on for, they called those units task force. This was a Butler task force. There was Fraser task force, and we was on them all. In other words, there was a group that had artillery with them, tanks with them. Not many tanks because they couldn't keep up. Because when we go 70, 80 miles in one day, then you'd hit what we call a shitstorm. But I guess maybe, anyway, that's what we call it. And the Germans would knock us off, you know, and then we'd have to take over and to go. But, and of course, the Battle of Montgomery, we had to retrace, we had to pull back and go down route, I don't know whether it's 6 or Napoleon, but anyway, we had to cut the Germans off at Montgomery. The 36th Division was very big in that, where there's hundreds and hundreds of weapons and cars and trucks and horses, very, very beautiful horses, and many, many Germans. I mean, this was a slaughter to a point, but this was war. So then, of course, we go north, and from there on, we go into Sauvigny, Béchation, then as farther as we get into Colmar, Strasbourg. We were in Strasbourg on the Christmas of '44. We had been on the lines 130 some days since August 15th. This division has had no relief. In other words, all we did is pull back for a few hours and get a few more replacements. From there, of course, back on the lines. Well, then of course, by that time the weather was really getting really bad in France too. We had a real tough winter in France, and it was become somewhat of a storm. Earlier, they had been close to the Rhine, but the closest to the Rhine that I was at that time was Strasbourg. We sat right on the Rhine River in a great big old building, and of course we were all in hopes, and we did get our mail. Packages and mail was the lifeblood of infantry guys, and my folks probably sent more packages, and of course we always shared them with our platoon. In other words, the platoon normally was probably 45 guys, normally, but with attrition that we put up with, if we run with 30 guys, we were lucky, very lucky. For 4 squads, in other words, the squad should have had a normal full squad would have had about 12 people, and but of course this didn't happen simply because of the attrition of the war, and I really, I go on to because of. In between Colmar and Strasbourg, I get a severe concussion, and this is where I go back to a hospital. I apparently lost it because a kid got killed right from me to one of you fellas right here. And I guess I lost it, and they sent me back to this hospital. But I would not known where this hospital was without some further information just within the last couple of years. It is not on my military records. You'll find on my records and the sheet that I have when I got, there was only one time in St. Pietro or in Italy that I was wounded. In other words, a Purple Heart with one cluster, or with no clusters at that point. Now, so all these years, I go back, 1998, I went back to Europe, and with the 36th Division had a tour. And there was about 42 of us guys. They were in all different units of the 36th Division, but there were 36 guys, so that made the camaraderie still great, no matter whether it was infantry or whether it was cannon companies or whatever. But at that point, I get home, and of course then I find, I had all these letters that my mother had saved. She had a shoebox that's probably got a couple hundred letters in it. I don't really know how the hell I ever wrote that many letters, but they're there. And as I read through some of those letters, I find out that I wrote home when I was in the hospital, January 5th of 45, I'm sorry. And I didn't get back to the unit till February 10th or 12th of 45. But this is why I call it a no-name hospital. So therefore, besides that, I have another letter that says when I met this Eleanor Frew, that unit had moved into France, and I'd met her again there. It verifies it again. So therefore, so when I get home, I have a friend of mine that drops a card every once in a while. He does it on the email, but he says, Ben, he says, check out this doctor. He's in Buffalo and Amherst, and he's in old folks. He's in him and his brothers are in a nice unit, I suppose. I haven't met him personally, but I've been on email and phone. Warren Montgomery. He was a captain. He had a regimental aide. What did they call him? Aid station, or what did they call him at that time? And I call him up and I get him on the email, and of course I asked him, I said, were you from the cadre from the 23rd General out of Buffalo? He says, hell yeah, he says, I was, and he's still living today. But anyway, he tells me, I said, well, did you know an Eleanor Frew? Hell yeah, he says, I knew Eleanor Frew. He says, I even know who she married over there. Well, this story goes on because she was a neighbor of ours, see? And then, of course, in this letter, I wrote that I had met her again in France. But still, I don't know the name of this hospital. So I asked this Warren Montgomery, I says, Warren, I says, what was the name of the hospital? I says, I was there, but there's nothing on my military records. I was in the hospital a second time over there in Europe. Well, he says, don't you know it was Vittel, V-I-T-T-E-L? I says, no, I don't know it was Vittel. If I did, I wouldn't ask you. So then I go into it more, and I've been on in the computer and stuff and email and that, and you can get Vittel, but I can't find no history yet. I'll get it, because I got a couple of guys that lives in France that's searching it a little more for me too. But anyway, to go on with it, how much time you got?
We're good. Yeah, so you were in February 45, you were in the hospital.
Okay. And after I left the hospital, I get back to the unit again. Of course, they always they try to tell you that you're going to go, they're going to put you in a pool, see? Well, that's the worst thing they can do to an infantry guy, because he don't know nobody anyway. But if you send him someplace else, when you get back to the unit, yeah, you know the attrition may have taken some of your buddies while you're gone, and it did. When I got back, the best friend I ever had, and he was the best sergeant I guess I ever had, he was a platoon sergeant, he's gone. He got hit bad. He made it, but in the end he made it, but he got hit real bad. So the first sergeant says, Palmer, you're a platoon leader. No, this was still 5 months of war going on, see? And, you know, I was 20 years old, I guess, by then. I was getting pretty old man. And, but I had the platoon for the next 5 months. But this, of course, there's so much of the story that was, you know, through the Siegfried Line after Strasbourg, that will be in my book and that. And there's so many things that I'm sure I left out, because for me, with the after-action reports that I had, the letters that was written home, and of course the Signal Corps film, of course, kind of kind of tops that deal in Italy for me. My sister seen it in Orchard Park in a theater, and it was in a film of What's My Name? And my sister seen it, and the people in Orchard Park in the theater said, well, that's your brother? Yeah, she said. Well, they cut out 5 foot of the film, and I have the film today. But so then in the book there, that one, I don't, it's a large, I had it enlarged, but it was a frame of me on patrol, full garb, of course, in Italy. And then the other, I have so many stories, and then of course in the last few years now, or last couple of years, I've been going in our historical book is a roster, and in this roster is all the guys that fought. Of course, I go through there and pick out a lot of guys. Well, I go and call their original address, and some of them I hit about 5 out of 10, and one is a Herb Golden that was my first. He was the first sergeant, not a first sergeant per se, but my first sergeant in my platoon when I got in Italy. And he went home in the 5th month of '44, and us guys, we don't know why. How come these guys are all going home? All our non-coms are going home. Well, they're old National Guard units that would have been upped, and they got a lot of time in. Well, they'd been 3 years in the U.S. in the National Guard. These kids all they were tough living in those days. It was right after Depression, and there was big, large families, boys. Some of these divisions had 2 and 3 of the same family young men in their service. Anyway, this Sergeant Golden, I had 4 rolls of film from an old 620 camera, and those are in my, you see some of them in there. That was my own personal camera. At that time, just an old 620 box camera. And I said, Herb, will you take these photos home? Yeah, he said, or the rolls of film home, I'm sorry. And he did, and he sent, I have the letters in my book that he sent, and he wrote to my mother telling her that he was sending her the film, or the photos, and he was going to take a copy of them, you know, which was fine. And he had made a copy and sent to my folks, and of course I still have them to this day, of mostly just being off the lines when we were getting replacements and re-upping, because we didn't carry cameras on the line. We had enough stuff to take care of to keep that. But either way, so last fall, or a year ago, I get on the phone, and it's Mahia, Texas. I call his number, or call the address and tell the operator, I says, is Herbert Golden still on this address? And it was him. And so I said, Herb, you remember Ben Palmer? Yeah. And he thought a minute, he said, my God. So the neat part is, we met him this fall. We was going to the reunion, so we took one day earlier. My wife and I, and from Waco, they picked us up at Waco. The news cameras was there, and interviewed both of us, and I have the film of that. But here it is, 56 years later, I meet a sergeant, and he tells my mother, you know, that he'd had me on patrol with him. Of course, I'm a PVT in them days, kids. I'm pretty young. And so this is, you know, part of the whole history, that there's a million stories, and most of them I keep, you know, and in this story, you know, there's so many times that I just wonder. I have a little problem with some of these Medal of Honor winners that here a year ago they had 22 Nisi 442 Medal of Honor winners. All of a sudden, after 56 years, I fought alongside of both places, Italy and France. Now, did they get our 141 Regiment Battalion out of trouble? Yes. But how in the world, our whole division only had 14 or 15 Medal of Honor winners in over 2 years of combat. I just think it's a really big injustice to guys that never, maybe some of these guys, poor guys, never had an hour, 10 hours, or 5 hours battle, and they're gone forever. You know, it was just. I know the guys that went there to this thing in Washington. I asked, a couple of those fellows are on email with me, and I asked this one fellow, and I said, Ray, what do you think of that? And I said, how could 56 years later, and then he sent me a copy of every one of those letters of how they come to this, and half of them are telling me that they shot down 13 enemy or 23 enemy. Listen, I was 22 months in combat, and I'll tell you what, I never seen no enemy stand in front of me and let me shoot at them yet. And I don't buy it, I'm sorry, but I don't know whether that's relevant or not, but it just makes me feel bad because I think I was an honest soldier, and I think I have an honest story. And like I tell you, I can back anything up that anybody wants to know, because it bothers me a lot that some of this stuff that, and I don't know if anybody of you understand how the medals were got out in the first place. When the war ended, we were all trying to find some medals to get home for points, because you got to remember, I'm going to back up and tell you one, because all the old non-coms were gone, and we never had a parade. We never had a place where they gave us medals. Not in our division. Now they may have in some. We never was on a parade through a town after a big victory. We didn't do that. I don't know who done that. Not us. No, I don't take nothing away from anybody that's supporting the infantry and this and that and the other thing. But come on, give the guy that that moved the arrows in the sand a bit of a bite here, because. And the kids were running the war. I mean, let's face it. At the end of the war, that's all we had was 18 to 20-year-old kids, and a few non-coms and that. And I'm not prejudiced to the infantry because I was there, but I know what we did and what we had to sacrifice and what we went through. Why I made the story, I don't know.
Hold there for a minute.
Mm-hmm. I just tell my wife, I said, I guess I had this one more job to do. I guess it was to write and tell my story about how we made it in Italy. Not that I'd done anything different than anybody else, but artillery show. And artillery was our mortars were our worst enemies, and artillery was next. Small arms was nothing near like you might think. Not that it wasn't there, don't worry about that. But as far as actual getting hurt, like any place in France and that, in the mountains where the trees, Italy, there was so much barren, no trees at all, high mountains, no nothing. But in France, all your rolling mountains and that were covered with pine trees, and of course they used a shell at that time, and I'm sure you're familiar with it would touch a branch, what do you call them, they'd blow off, they didn't have to touch very much, and you get this. So it was quite a career, I suppose.
Well, let's finish up after the Siegfried line.
Mm-hmm.
You were in Germany.
Yep.
How did the war end for you?
Okay, we went there. From there, we would. After we went across the Siegfried line, we basically was heading for just I guess occupation to a point, but also settling DP camps, I guess, or helping to try to settle them, putting DDT in their skirts or bellies or whatever, because it was lousy. And trying to keep them from killing each other, for one, because they had every Polish, Hungarian, and Slovak, whatever, you name it, they were there. Mm-hmm. And of course, at Landsberg, we was at Landsberg for quite a while, guarding the place there, and of course I walked through Landsberg prison where they had that thing loaded with prisoners. Of course, that was where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And then I did not get to Dachau. Our 45th Division went straight east, and they got into Dachau and all this gold and stuff that they finally found. But anyway, to get back to where we were, we got to help with these DP camps, try to keep order, and then occupation. See, after the war, we'd searched every house that was in all these small villages. We'd pull in and take over a couple homes for like a platoon, see, and you had to search every house in the place for arms and Nazi stuff. And that was basically what we were doing. Of course, they had us troops to do something with, and otherwise after the war, there was a lot of American guys over there. And we ended up, we stayed in, we'd come further north, but we still right around Munich, and that's about as far north as I got. I didn't get to Berlin. because they weren't letting us roam very far away because, you know, even though the war was over. And I didn't get out of there till October. I think I got home October 26th, 20th or along in there, 45. So that's, he's from May 8th to October, June, July, August, September, 5 months, 6 months per there. And, but we were just doing occupation. But you got to remember, the war in the Pacific had not ended. That didn't end until August 16th, I think, when they dropped the bomb, the atom bomb. See, so, and of course, at that point in time, we really didn't know where we were going. We didn't know maybe we'd be going home in like 4 hours. A tech sergeant, I suppose they could have sent me home and put me in troop training or something out if the Pacific hadn't ended. So that ended, and of course, then there's the mad rush on to get our points together. I come out of there, I guess it was finally 78, but see, we had disadvantage there because all the I call them rear echelon, but all the headquarters companies and all that had older, and they had the older guys, and they were going home because of time in the service, see? In other words, it wasn't time on a line company, it was time in service, flat out. So in other words, this is where the Bronze Stars and stuff come, because with a combat infantry badge, you automatically got one Bronze Star. And then I guess the other two, or the other one you get for, well, that was for some type of meritorious service, I guess, or something. And of course, the captain that I had that got hit, I have a story, a letter from a captain that had got hit real bad just about the time we crossed the Siegfried line. This Captain Chambers, he got really banged up, and he wrote a letter from England to the company. But by that time, we were on our way. Well, here a year ago, this is another one that I had contacted. I had this Harold Warner from Selling Grove, PA, on a postcard type of deal, a cardboard. And he was Company B, 143. So I call on the presumption, I just called his name, and had my operator, and I had the town, see? And I got into him, and I got his wife, and she said, yeah, I said, is Harold there? Yes, she says, Harold's here. Who is this? And I told her, see, and I said, so I get Harold on the phone, and of course he was Captain Chambers' driver. So here's another nice connection. So it goes on, I said, well, have you a membership for the 36th Division Association, see? Which you have a membership. No, he says, I never belong. And so we get to talking, so I said, I'll send you a membership. I'll get you a membership. On the quarterly, on our little magazine we get every quarter, there's a place on the back to get a guy's membership, see? So I sent him that 3-year membership, see? So he calls back after he gets it, this is a month or 6 or 8 weeks after, he gets a membership for 3 years, see? And of course he's 84 years old. So he says, what the hell did you send me 3 years for? He says, you've been enough. I said, well, you gotta make it for 3 years, and then you get your own damn membership. So then he says, did you ever read the letter that Captain Chambers had wrote to the company? And I said, probably not. I know I hadn't read it because I was probably already gone. See, because what they did do, a lot of the guys got back to Company B before they sent them back, trying to get them back home. So here's a letter, 56 years old, talking about all the guys that was in his company. He mentions my name and 4 more guys. It says 56-year-old letter that I'd never seen. I have it in my book. And he says, well, I'll send you. I said, well, just send me a copy. No, he says, I'm sending you the original. So I have it. But just checking up on these things, it's really neat. It's neat because, and that kid that got killed right next to me, I got a hold of her. Well, I got a hold of his family, live in Illinois, or Iowa, I can't say Iowa, I think it was, Whitaker. I got his sister. And his sister says, you know, he was my favorite cousin or whatever it was, brother, I'm sorry. And she says, and I had a photo of him on some of those that he was early, some of those early photos. He was on the offline photo, but it was him. Well, you talk about the family that was really just made them feel good, you know, that somebody would take the time, and it's quite a neat thing. Yet you're really reluctant to call folks because you don't know just exactly what kind of, but everyone I've called and have hooked up has been great. So I guess I kind of like leave it there, and I don't know whether there's anything else, questions you want to know about. I can
Sure.
probably tell you.
A whole bunch of them. When you first got to Italy, you were a placeman going into the 36th
Yep.
Division. How well did they receive you?
With the Texas boys, we had a little tough time. I'll tell you what. And here, you would ask about that. On the trip back, just to show you the difference, on the trip back to Europe, we were not our problem. I know we were several hours late getting to Rome. Sorry, no, London. Our tour guide was there to pick us up at London. No, I'm sorry, at Rome. So these guys are all waiting out in the bus that had been waiting for several hours, and it was warm and that. And they were waiting the bus for the two of us. There was two, me and another guy. And that, anyway, so I get on a bus, and this Gordon Rose, I know him quite well from these other reunions I'd been with. He starts yapping, see? And I says, I'll tell you what, Gordon, if it hadn't been for us damn Yankees, you'd have been still down there fighting the war. So then I says, and furthermore, because I'm a little ticked, I says, furthermore, us damn old Yankees had to learn a new language before we knew what the hell you guys was talking about. Well, you know, after that, the trip went beautiful. We had a great time. That was probably the best trip that these guys ever had, because I kept them going. We had a good time. And, you know, because you can't sit back and not talk, and you can't talk to each other. You know, hey, we were all in the same division, no matter what, but that don't mean we agreed on everything. Yeah.
What do you remember about Captain John Wasco?
Slight of figure. You know, we privates never got to talk to captains. I guess I'll put that way. He probably didn't ever know me. I'm sure he didn't. I'm sure he knew the old fellas that he come with, because he trained with them in the U.S. for several years, see, with the same company. And this is why the story was more unique to those fellows that had been with him all this time, from U.S. all the way through, up in Camp Edwards or wherever it was, they trained as they come closer to Atlantic to get on boats. Like I say, at the point of being placed in the unit and being exactly probably nothing more than just about that, because as you know, in other words, PVTs don't mingle with officers. You know, in other words, that's just the way it was, and still today. I mean, you have your your steps and officers, and the PVTs, I expect, we knew our place, and after all, this is the way it was. And did even at the short time, see, I really only fought with him 40 some odd days before I get hit. But see, but it was unique simply for the fact that, hey, he was my captain, provable. In other words, the same old story again. It's not copycat or copyright or whatever. Like I say, there's some stories written that I don't agree with that happened. I have, in fact, I know not a personal friend, it was a buddy of mine that claimed some things that I don't think happened, but hey, I'm not arguing with them, because these guys got to live with whatever they tell you. That's the way I take that part of it. It's just, he didn't do me no harm, and everybody liked him, and I guess probably us guys liked him too, because he, like I say, he was a captain, and you have to remember, a captain can't be every place at any one given time. In other words, how many times did I see a captain lead in front of my unit? Probably none. Was he somewhere in the unit? Probably, certainly. See, you just have to, I don't think anybody can realize how this war was ever won, ever pulled off. Think about it in Italy. We were on the mountains for days and days. We sat there for 3 and 4 hours shelling at a time. I don't know how the hell we lived. We didn't live. We were just like animals. We was worse than animals, because the animal run away. Or if he didn't get killed first. You know what I mean? It's just so much stuff that my head is, I suppose if I had... See, and the weirdest part is the first 55 years, I didn't open the letter, I didn't do nothing. I didn't even know that picture I showed you that my platoon was against the wall there and I'm in it. I didn't know that till 5 years ago, that I'd found myself in that picture. And there's 2 or 3 guys in there that I'll tell you what, they don't want to tell me that they ain't there because I know them guys. I fought with them for pretty near 2 years. And, you know, it just, and then my wife was going crazy because, you know, I said, you just have to, you know, this stuff is back in my mind now, and with so much material to back it up, I just can't let it go. I guess that's...
Why do you think after 55 years it's come back, you're interested in it now?
When we come back from the service?
No,
now?
55 years later, why is it coming back to you? Why are you interested
Well,
in it
because
now?
I went back to Europe, went back to Italy, France, and Germany. Traveled a lot of places where we'd been.
You did that after you got interested?
No. Really, before I started getting into letters and that. I knew the box of letters was there all these years, but I never had time. You got to remember, when I got out of service, I went to farming, dairy farm, by myself. At that time, days and age, that was one tough son of a gun. It's not much better now. But we go on, we have a family, buy the next farm from where we grew up, buy some more land, add the buildings, add the cattle. My boys graduate from high school. My oldest son, we had 4 kids. The oldest and the youngest was boys. The oldest says he went on a trip to Europe for his graduation. Didn't go to college. Come back, and so he stays on the farm. He says, "Dad, we don't want to be partners. We don't want to be hired help on the farm. We want to be with you all the way across the board." So he buys in, or he gets in on the long term, short term, and the whole 9 finances. My youngest son, Greg, he graduates several years later, 4 years later, whatever it is. So he comes in and joins us. So now they have I don't think I have a picture, but we have a new complex at milking 1,200 head of cattle. Our other business, now Greg and him are partners. My 2 sons are partners on that. We have another business in Arcade, New York, where we make a hardwood pellet fuel for residential stoves. Have you heard of pellet stoves? Mm-hmm. We make 40,000, 50,000 ton a year in Arcade, New York. This is a new business that we started. But all these businesses are offspring from trying to keep the dairy alive, trying to subsidize the dairy. This is tough, and it's not much better with 1,200. But either way, we're in it, and that's where you're going to be. So, and of course, I'm the father of that. I had 2 girls in between it. Now, of course, the girls generally go on their own way, but the boys stayed with Dad and Mom, and where Dad and Mom would have been today, God knows. Because one man could not even take care of that many cows, for one thing. Oh, and of course, you know, they get a lot of credit for sticking with Dad and Mom, and of course, you know, it's been a very, very busy life. So then, like I said, in '98, I had a chance to go to Europe. And this probably was the opening door of my whole, and in that time, I had a kid out, and in fact, there's three guys that are still alive today. One of them lives in Colorado, which I've visited several times, and he had the after-action reports that he sent me a copy, and I have them home. Mm-hmm. In other words, I can, there again, because if I wasn't in the hospital wounded, I might have been on a 5-day pass, but the rest of the time, I'm somewhere with this unit, because it's the only unit I served with throughout the whole damn war, which makes it a lot easier to talk about for me. So, and of course, with all the letters, that was my whole, and of course, at that point, see, now I can go in, I can pretty near give you, I'll be pretty near quite accurate on any date that I give you. You can pretty near bet on it, because I've been with this, and I've read, because I hand wrote the whole thing in the first place of my story of 5, I'm not sure of the name yet, whether it's going to be 22 months of combat in Europe, or 22 months of combat with a rifle platoon, or, you know, some such a thing, because I have to get a couple points in the other thing, like I told you before, is some people take a little offense to me. I call us guys the original GIs, because we were, in a sense. We were put in with old line divisions or old guard divisions. These guys was military career type of people at that time in their life. Let's face it. We had 13 weeks basic training. We were shipped butt overseas. And this didn't happen just to me. It happened to thousands and thousands of guys, if you look it up. And people, somebody takes offense at me calling. I said, well, I'll tell you guys, we were GIs. My wife says, well, they're all GIs. Yeah, well, they probably were all GIs. But we didn't volunteer. We're not enlisted men. We were drafted. But then you got to say, well, yeah, but 18, 19 year old, what the hell else did you know? You're just getting out of high school, and that's where they grabbed us. In other words, did we have the chance to go to college? No, I don't know. Probably we wanted, but I'm not sure at that point. But all you had to do was quit the last year of high school, and I know all about that.
Did you ever run across Bill Molden when you were in the division?
No, but see, he ran around pretty much with the 45th Division, basically. And I'll tell you what. That guy had it right. I tell you, if anybody, I'd like to shook his hands another time, but I don't even know if he's alive now. But yes, I know who you're talking about very much.
I thought he was 36 for a while before he was 45th.
He could have been. He could have been. See, it's just like when you read the story of Andy Rooney's My War. Come on, Andy. You know, you call it your war, but my war, but I don't know about that. You know, there again, you know, a lot of guys say, well, what do you talk about the guy for? I says, you know, guess what? When things got tough, he got a chance to get the hell out of there. We didn't. I mean, that's the difference. I don't care what the hell they say. You know, there's no way you can explain combat at any given time because it doesn't stay the same.
Were you there? You were there for the Battle of San Pietro?
Yeah, that's why I got hit.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever see the movie about it after?
Yeah, I got that movie. I'm in the damn thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Where?
Oh, you got to be able to pick me out. I'm in there. Yeah. See, this is, you didn't show him that. You didn't see that picture in there. Did you see it?
No, not yet. I'll take a look in a minute.
Oh, okay.
But what was it like at San Pietro?
What was it like?
Yeah.
It was just typical Italian battleground. I mean, this is the way we fought in Italy. You was on the mountains or you was in the valley. You was going up the mountains. You should read the story about me coming back from, and then going back up on Samorco or 1205 mountain behind a mule. I was so goddamn weak I couldn't do nothing. I mean, you got that thing. Oh man, and I hung on a poor old mule's trail for halfway up the mountain because they only could go halfway for one thing. But I'll tell you a little story about that. Because I was so doggone weak, you know, because we hadn't trained. I come out of the hospital. They didn't have no programs for us. I finally get back, find my own unit. So I hook on this mule train all by myself. I'm going up with this mule, hanging on a poor old mule. And of course I tell about the story where this old mule, we get up and it's pitch black dark. And these trails 3 foot wide. If you steps left, you go down 500 feet or 100 feet. Who the hell knows? Dark, you don't know. Anyway, we stopped for a break and this old mule takes a pee. And I says, well, I know now that she was a girl mule. and that wasn't rain from the natural sources. But just, you know, and it's pretty true. I mean, to 99% of them, because this is the way I went up there. The story about being peed on may have been a little over a little bit, but, you know, it just makes it, this is where we get halfway up the mountain. That's as far as it could go. At that mountain, as we come back down, and the time I got hit, you could, after you got halfway down, there was everything, you didn't have to look for rations because it was all there. They could have fed 2 armies from just what was dropped. And the Italians that was leading those mules, they were useless. I shouldn't say that, I guess. Do
whatever you want.
They were, the mules knew more than they did. I guess that's probably a bad statement. But either way, the poor old mules standing there and the shells go right by her, tear them all to hell, and they wouldn't move. 99% of them wouldn't move. And, you know, and if you think, and you never get it out of your head, but yet time heals a lot of stuff. The misery, you can think about it a lot. I'm not sure that it'll ever leave your head because, you know, otherwise it's just unbelievable. The number of days we sat in the mountains in Italy. Italy was terrible. It was really a break for us to get the hell out of Italy because, see, at Anzio, of course, it was Rapido River really messed things up there nearly for the 36th Division, because we lost a lot of guys, a lot of KIAs and a lot of casualties, big numbers of casualties. And to try to pull it third time, and thank the Lord I wasn't there, because like I say, I'm telling you wherever I was, I'm telling you where I was, but if I wasn't there, I didn't take no claim, and them poor devils that did go there, I tell you, I take nothing from them fellas. I think I pulled a lot of duty after that, and I'm damn proud American. I tell you, I fought with a good bunch of guys, and you know, anybody that for day in day out infantry, we just didn't live like they did even in headquarters or away from the line. We didn't live like that. We lived like worse than animals, I guess, because you know, how do you put it together when it's continuous? If it isn't the weather, it's artillery. It's this, it's that. It's continuous patrolling. For what reason? I don't know. And I even, there's a little story in there when in France where I lost it one night. I was to take a patrol and I didn't take it out, and it's in the story. It was a good thing in the morning I didn't have to, and this Chambers was the one I would have reported to. It never was reported because I had lost it that night. And that may have been the carry up to when I was in this hospital, see, because you don't know what the hell it does to your head. And we had 140 some odd days from southern France invasion, no relief. Hours or several hours at a time to get replacements, and this is what it was. I'm back on the line. And then in Strasbourg, we were there for Christmas of '44. 2 days, we thought we was going to have a break. We'd relieved the 3rd Division, 15th Regiment out of 3rd Division. We'd relieved them in the same building, because that's what happened normally. We get in there, we got a big old building, just an old cement stove, just an old building, but hell, we could burn right on the old cement floor. We had fires and everything else. That's the first time we had fires to get warmed up in months, for God's sake. And 2 days later, well, before we done that, we found 2 holes in the walls across the Rhine. We had some bazooka shells, we stuck them in the holes and floated some bazooka shells across the Rhine. Well, that stirred the Krauts up, and regimental got shelled, see? So they called back, and who the hell ever, they got us on the phone, our platoon sergeant. I wasn't platoon sergeant then, I was staff. And who the hell ever is pulling that stuff across the Rhine? You better leave it alone unless you really see something move. Well, we didn't do no more of that. The next day, we get our packages and that, and all, you know, everybody shares everything on the lines again. Now this was when the Germans were trying to infiltrate. They were using American uniforms, they was using American Jeeps. So that night, 3rd or 4th day after Christmas, just about the first of the year, we went on to this very large field of there was anti-aircraft guns plus the searchlights. They were all on the ground. This was the night, and I don't know how many it was, probably 100 of them in this very large field. But they said, I read it again, but they said there was bouncing light off the clouds to light up the terrain ahead of us, see? But the Germans had been infiltrating with their American uniforms on and Jeeps and everything else, because that was just about, well, you remember now, if you go back to North France, Bastogne, Christmas time, 44 was when Bastogne and the breakthrough up north, and of course this was all coincided, and of course this was one of the Germans' last gasp to try to bust it up, and they were trying to mess up the 7th Army, and of course we'd been sitting outdoors in mud deep and water filled foxholes and everything else. I mean, it was just a bad situation. So Celestat, Gaberside, oh, you name them, I was there. I can tell you 100 of them.
Well, I think we're coming down towards the end of the tape here, so we'll give you a last opportunity. Is there anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
No, I think I pretty well covered it, and hope it didn't bore you guys to death. But I'll tell you, you know, it's nice in a way that someone can tell his story and have it and even if this book doesn't go anywhere, at least my kids will have it. And so, and the other side of it is, it just seemed to me that I needed to do this for a lot. I don't know which reason was the most important to me, but it's just like when I went back in '98 there to the cemeteries in Nettuno in northern Italy, the very large cemetery there, and then Epinal in France, where I was in a wreath ceremony. This is one thing they did on this tour. They went to these grave sites. The guys was able to go to the roster or whatever in the mausoleums and look up the guys where they was buried. This Nelson Lesueur, which was, he fought with us all the way from Italy and all the way through France, well, up into the Colmar, Strasbourg area, and he got killed. And so many of them, you know, that it just blows your mind simply because, hey, I'm still going. It's just like old Dick Hutman would say, "Oh, Palmer, you escaped the Grim Reaper again," you know, on this one deal that off the mountain before we got into Rome, you know, and then this one on, and nobody has the reason or why, you know. I mean, but I'm so happy and glad that I was able to come home and have a fruitful life, I guess you'd call it. A very, very wonderful family and several good businesses, and feel pretty proud of what we've accomplished, our family, and quite proud of the whole 9 yards. So, and I'll tell you, there was never a bunch of better guys in the world that just kind of awesome, you know. So, folks, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.